French, my ass.
I'm only 4. Bonjour, Monsieur Pussycat.
Cracking toast, right?
Start spreading the news.
Hello everyone and welcome to the short podcast about short films. I'm your host and today we are discussing the Academy Award for Best Animated Short. Today's episode is yet another in-between season bonus episode. I will look back on the decade we've passed, look for common themes or any interesting developments, and how this decade reflects upon the upcoming decades. I will also share my top 10 nominees of the decade and give a few non-nominated recommendations, so stick around. But first, as always, I have to thank all the people who took some time to talk about Oscar-nominated animated shorts with me. So thank you to Zeta Short, Juan Carlos Ollano, Sam Meltzer, Joey Gentili, Gordon McNulty, Christoph, Zara Wood, Fritz, Owen Daly, and Jacob Sanchez. Always so happy that people will willingly talk to me about short films, and the best part is that they're all returning guests or people who have said they would be eager to return. This podcast is always a delight to make, and that's mainly because every single guest is so wonderful. I'm always happy to talk to them, no matter how many times they come on. But onto the business at hand. The 1960s is the first time where we really see the full repercussions that the death of the studio short had on this category. While before this category was almost nothing but shorts from major Hollywood studios, in the 60s, 65% of nominees were from independent or non-American studios, and that number is going to rise higher next decade as Disney and Warner Brothers and MGM further decreased their short film output. Though despite their small showing in nominations, they still took home a fair amount of wins. The Patty Freeling Enterprises, the successor to Warner Brothers Animation and operating out of the old studio, won for The Pink Fink. MGM won for the Chuck Jones, Maurice Noble directed The Dot and the Line, and there were 2 wins for Disney at the end of the decade. A posthumous Walt Disney win for Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day, and a Ward Kimball win for It's Tough to Be a Bird. Though I thought it was funny how these 4 wins came in years where they were the only studio nominees in the lineup, whereas years where the majority of nominees were studio films was when the non-studio films would win out, like Monroe and Ersatz, in the first 2 years of the decade. Half the studio nominations in the decade are in those first 2 years, and they all lost to the 2 films animated behind the Iron Curtain. On that note, as the nominations for the studios begin to run dry, what takes its place? Well, first we see more independent American animators, in particular Faith and John Hubley, who earned 4 more nominations and 2 more wins this decade, after becoming the first independent winner in 1959. But also worth mentioning, Wolf Murakami, who earned 2 nominations, including a win for The Box, and William L. Snyder, the head producer of Rembrandt Films, the American company based in Czechoslovakia, who garnered 4 nominations, including a win for the aforementioned Monroe. And worth noting that all those films were directed by Gene Deitch and had almost no creative input from Snyder, but so it goes. Another major force really rearing its head this decade is the National Film Board of Canada, which garnered the first nomination for a non-American studio in 1952, and since then garnered 6 more nominations and 0 wins, a streak that will continue well into the 70s, after which, spoilers, they end up getting 3 wins in a row. I once again want to thank NFB not only for their high-quality short films, but for presenting those shorts in such a high quality on their YouTube page and website. The NFB has such a deep well of fascinating animation and documentaries, and I highly recommend just setting aside an afternoon and going through their channel, just watching anything that seems interesting based on the title and thumbnail. You won't regret it. Moving on, we find our last group of nominees, the Europeans. Chief amongst them is Zagreb Film, who may have only gotten 2 nominations this decade with another 2 in the 70s, but they also round out our list of winners with Ersatz, which is the first non-American winner and will be the only non-English language winner until the 80s. Although, technically, there's some other shorts with no dialogue, so I guess those maybe count, but what I mean is non-American winner that isn't Canadian, British, or Australian either. In addition to the Yugoslav-based Zagreb Film, we also have nominees from Czechoslovakia, France, Italy, and the UK. If we combine the Canadians and Europeans into one category, we would have a nearly even three-way split in terms of the nominee distribution between studio animators, American independents, and non-American nominees, with the former two with 14 nominees apiece, and the European and Canadian category with only 12. And when counting wins, 4 go to the studios, 5 to the American independents, and only 1 to non-American studios. What this is really telling us about this category at this time is that the Academy really doesn't want to move away from the American studios, but are finding themselves forced to do so. And so the smallest jump to take is towards other Americans not entrenched in the Hollywood system. And it's almost funny how John Hubley, former UPA director who was kicked out of Hollywood due to the blacklist, becomes the most nominated person in the post-studio era and has the most wins, tying for that with Nick Park of Wallace and Gromit fame, both men having 3 wins. And keep in mind, only one other person, Frederick Bach, has more than 1 win in the post-studio era. And the Oscars are desperate to cling onto some sense of normalcy in this category, and I think once the death of Walt Disney comes around, that is impossible to maintain, which is why next decade we're going to see the winners branch out further. That will continue even into the 80s. But that's enough boring facts and figures. I think I've said enough about the 60s. What's really important is the stuff I liked. So here are my top 10 nominees of the 1960s. Number 10 is The Thieving Magpie. I adore the colorful cutout animation. The story it tells of a magpie getting revenge on hunters is just a lot of fun. Number 9, Clay, or On the Origin of Species. It's one thing for a film to be influential, and this short is a big step forward in the art of claymation, but it's another thing for a short to be good, and this one is luckily very good. Just a fun and engaging take on the theory of evolution, and some great usage of clay. Number 8 is the Herb Alpert and Tijuana Brass double feature. You have 2 great, iconic songs, put to 2 fun short films stapled together. Plus, I'm a sucker for anything Hubley and anything with catchy music. Number 7 is The Pink Fink. In the Pink Panther's first short film, it has the formula so perfect. One of the best usages of the big guy, little guy dynamic that we've come to know and love. Number 6 is Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day. How can you not love Winnie the Pooh? Like, come on, that's it. It's Winnie the Pooh, and Winnie the Pooh is amazing. Oh, and the Heffalumps and Woozle song is great. Number 5 is Pianissimo. A very simple short featuring a piano getting painted with some music over top, but I was just in love with the whole thing. I just loved the way it moves. It was just very entertaining and well made. Number 4 is The Drag, an anti-smoking PSA that is colorful and amazing and wickedly funny to the point where it almost makes smoking seem cool, but that's not a bad thing. I guess it is when you're a PSA, but I didn't. It helped me enjoy it. Number 3 is The House That Jack Built, full of energy and humor and blunt but effective messaging, a perfect pastiche on kids' stories and the search for wealth. Number 2 is Monroe. Now, as I said in the episode, this is a short that would be a perfect thing to study in schools. Just an expert usage of the limited time it has to tell a fun, quick story about a child who gets drafted. It's hilarious. And number 1 is Walking. Perfect usage of the animation medium. It's a study of humanity through the way we walk, which doesn't sound remarkable, but Ryan Larkin's animation and the music underscoring it turns it into something truly amazing and profound. I can't recommend this one enough. And as for non-nominated films, it feels like almost a waste of time to mention perhaps the most famous animated short films ever made, that being the Charlie Brown and Rankin Bass holiday specials. In particular, I'm a big fan of A Charlie Brown Christmas and The Little Drummer Boy. I also mentioned Santa Claus is Coming to Town, but that's 1970. Another bona fide classic is Jiri Trnka's The Hand, a portrayal of what it's like to be an animator behind the Iron Curtain. If you're looking for more stuff from nominees this decade, first I will recommend the entire career of Ryan Larkin. He has only 5 films, and all of them are great, but also very, very short. Perhaps even too short. Then I will take any opportunity to talk about the Hubleys. I've forgotten how to pronounce their name. And I'll recommend their non-nominated shorts, Urbanissimo and The Cruise. I'll also mention Ward Kimball, who won in 1969 for It's Tough to Be a Bird. He also made an anti-war short called Escalation. It feels like he's getting out everything he couldn't do when he was in Disney. He's one of Disney's famous 9 old men, and it's just great stuff. And also, if you like Disney's Winnie the Pooh, perhaps check out the Soviet version of the stories as well. They have their own series of shorts based on the A.A. Milne stories, and they're quite great. Now, I will name 3 films, but I will say nothing about them outside their name and their director, just because I don't want to spoil anything about them, but trust me, they are great, and you should check them out. First is The Flat by Jan Svankmajer. Next is Film by Fyodor Kitruk. And last is Breaking a Branch's It is Forbidden by Kiichiro Kawamoto. Check those out. And one last short I have is a late-period Looney Tunes short, A Sheep in the Deep, directed by Chuck Jones, starring Ralph Wolf and Sam Sheepdog, who, in my opinion, are perhaps the most underrated Looney Tunes duo. They're hilarious, that short is amazing, check it out. And that's all I have for you today, a very short bonus episode, and come back next week as we get into the 1970s. Again, very grateful for all of you who are listening. This has been the short podcast about short films. Until next time, goodbye.